So you're using Wix and you want to add some filters to filter your data that's being displayed in a repeater or a table or something like that on your website. And you not only want to have filters, but you want to have conditional filters. So filters that filter other filters. For example, over here, if I am selecting a make of a car, I want to only have the models that pertain to that particular make as opposed to just a list of all the different models of all the different cars that I have in my collection. Welcome back to the Wix Wiz. I'm Eitan, and today we are going to be talking about how to implement conditional filters or filters that filter filters using Wix and some low code. We're going to try and do as much as we can without any code, and then just with a few lines of code, we are going to add in the functionality that I just demonstrated to you. If you don't want to miss videos on this channel, then I'd recommend going ahead and subscribing to the channel right below over here. That'll make sure that I also stay very happy and you stay very happy because there will be videos every week and you will not miss them. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's start off with a recap of what we did in the first episode of this series. So what we did is we added in a repeater and we connected it to a dataset. This dataset is the cars dataset, which is connected to our cars collection in the CMS. So if I go over here to your collections, you'll see that I have this collection with lots of different kinds of cars, and we have make, model, year, etc. Okay, and we have two filters set up here using absolutely no code. They're also connected to the same data set, and they're connected to the make and the model fields. Okay, so these are filtering by the make and model. And the problem that we're going to try solving today is the fact that when I select a make from the dropdown, it doesn't filter the model dropdown to include only the models that belong to a specific make, and vice versa. So if I go over here into preview mode, just to demonstrate this, so I'm going to select a make here. So let's say Audi. And you'll see here that it does indeed filter my collection. So it does filter the data set, but I still have all the models that I have for all the different cars. Okay, not all of these are Audi cars. Let me just demonstrate. I'll change it here to BMW. And you can see here that all the models are still here. And this isn't such a great user experience because if somebody selects BMW, there's no reason to allow them to filter by all the models. We should instead only allow them to filter by models that are BMW models. And I hope I have the hierarchy here correct because I'm not really such a car person, so I don't really, I think that, yeah, BMW is like the brand, so they probably have different models. I think that's the hierarchy. If I got it wrong, let me know in the comments. But what we're going to try and solve today is that problem, and we're going to be doing it using a little bit of dataset related Velo code. So as a principle for this video is I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible and use no code solutions wherever I can and code only where I absolutely have to. There may be other ways to approach this problem which would use more code, and might make more sense if you have more developer experience. But since I want to try and make this tutorial as accessible as possible, I'm going to maybe take a slightly quote-unquote longer route that goes through no-code solutions in some cases versus trying to solve it with some more complex code. In order to implement our double layer filtered, so a filter that filters another filter, we are going to first change the approach for how we connect our filters to data. So here we have our two dropdowns, and at the moment they are connected to filter content. But what I'm going to do is instead I'm going to change them into collecting content. And after I choose them to collect content, I'm not going to connect them to a data set up here, but rather over here where it says show list options, I am going to turn that on and I'm going to connect it to a new data set. Okay, so not our original cars data set, but I'm going to add in a new data set, which is going to be the data just for this dropdown. So let me go ahead and click here, add in dataset. And this data set is also going to be connected to our cars data set, but this will be our, let's say, make list data set. Okay, to differentiate it from the cars data set, which actually displays all the data from the cars. And after I've created the data set, I'm just going to go over here and select what the labels and values connect to. So at the moment they're not connected, and what I'm going to connect them to is our make field. Okay, let me just do that quickly. Select make here. And now if I go into preview mode, then what we should see is that this dropdown still has a list of all of the different makes. The only difference here is that there is no all option because Wix doesn't consider this dropdown a filter anymore. So there's no all option over here, but we'll talk about different ways that we can clear filters when we're using this approach. So at the moment, we still have all of the different makes, but they are not actually filtering our cars dataset. So we completely removed the ability to do filtering, but we still have the same options here inside of the dropdown. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for our model. So I'm going to go and create a new data set. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to change this to collect content. And I'm going to turn on show options from a collection. And I'm going to add a new data set. And I'm going to connect it again, still to the cars collection, and call this, let's say, model list data set. Okay, just like that. Awesome. So now, don't forget, of course, to connect the labels and values to the models. Okay, so now we have two dropdowns which have the different options over here. So we have a list of all the models, we have a list of all the makes. At the moment, you'll notice that they're not sorted, so it's not in alphabetical order like before. That we can easily change by going into the individual data sets. So if we go into the data set settings, for example, of the model list data set, and we change the sort over here to, for example, sort it, let's say, by the make field, by the model field and A to Z. So we're going to add in that sort. And then if we go into preview mode, so you'll notice that this is now in alphabetical order. Okay, so each one of these has now its own data set, which controls how the data inside of these individual dropdowns is displayed. The next thing we're going to need to do using some code is reinstate their filtering capabilities. So we need to make sure that these dropdowns can still filter our main cars dataset and our repeater. In order to add code to our Wix website, we're going to go over here to code and we're going to click start coding. This will open up several things within our dev environment. The important one that we're going to be dealing with mostly today is this code panel over here on the bottom, this IDE. If you're in Wix Studio, you also have the option to develop and write code within the Wix IDE, which is kind of like VS Code. If you come from a development background, I think since we're trying to go with the most simple option, we're going to do our development over here inside of the built-in Wix IDE. The code that we're going to be using today is this set filter code. This is something that we can add to a data set and apply a filter to it. So essentially what Wix was doing for us behind the scenes before, we are going to do ourselves using some code. The first step before adding in any code will be to give everything names. So I'm going to go over here to our dropdowns. I'm going to select the dropdown, and you'll notice here that if I open up the coding panel on the bottom, whenever I select an element, it will have an ID over here. It starts off with a default ID that Wix provides, and since I'm going to be writing code and I want it to be clear to me what each dropdown is in my code, I'm going to change the IDs to be something that's a little more related to what they actually do. So for example, this could be the make filter dropdown, and then I can select the model and rename it here to the model filter dropdown. Okay, so it's just simple like that. In addition to the two dropdowns, I'm also going to give unique IDs to the different data sets. In order to do that, I'm going to open up over here and click View All Page Datasets. And you can see here we have our cars dataset, make list dataset, and models list dataset. And each of them also has a unique ID. So dataset 1, dataset 2, dataset 3. Since those names don't really have a lot of significance to me, I'm going to rename them so that I know what each dataset is. So let me go into the cars dataset, and here I'm just going to rename the ID to be cars dataset, just like that. And I'm going to do the same thing for the make list dataset. So I'm just going to rename this makes dataset. And I'm going to go back and do the same thing for the models. And so this will be our models dataset. Okay, now that we have everything named, we are ready to start writing our first lines of code and allowing our two dropdowns to filter our cars dataset. To add in our filters, I'm going to open up our code panel over here, the IDE, and I'm going to just get rid of all this commented out code because we don't need it. And we're going to be writing our code inside of this onReady function. Okay, so all of our code is going to go inside of here. And we'll start off with the make dropdown. So to select an element, I'm going to use $W, open parentheses, open quotation marks, £, and then the ID that we gave it. So this is going to be the make filter dropdown, just like that. And I'm going to be tapping into the onChange event. Okay. Another way that you can add this in, if you want to write a little less code, is that you can select the dropdown. And then over here in the panel, you'll have a list of the different event handlers. And you can select, for example, the onChange event handler, and it will just automatically add in the code that I added in on top, right over here on the bottom. Then I would recommend just copy pasting it into the onReady function, okay, because you want it to be inside the onReady. Awesome. So that's another option for how you can do that. And now that we've added this onChange listener, what this essentially means is that whenever I change the dropdown or the value of the dropdown, i.e. select something from the dropdown, whatever code I write inside over here now will run. Okay, that's what onChange means. So what we're going to want to do inside of this onChange event listener is to set a filter for our dataset. So I'm going to first make sure that our dataset is loaded. The way that we do that is by selecting the dataset, so our cars dataset, dot on ready, and then we're going to open up another callback function just like that. And what this makes sure is that our dataset is ready and all the data is loaded before we actually apply any filters. Now that we're sure about that, we are ready to set our filter, and we're going to do that by selecting our dataset, cars dataset, dot set filter. And in order to set the filter, we're going to need to import something called Wix data. All of our imports will always go over here on the top above the onReady, and you can just write import Wix data like that, and you'll get like an automatic completion, and you can just click enter and import that up there on top. Now that we've done the import, we can create our filter. So it's going to be Wix data dot filter. And then we are going to decide what we want to filter by. So let's just take a pause over here and let me show you that this that I just wrote out over here is essentially what we have in the set filter documentation over here. So we have import Wix data from Wix data, selecting a data set, setting a filter, Wix data.filter, and then over here we have to apply the individual filters that we want. And here we have a list of all the different types of filters that we can do. This is also another advantage to doing the filters with code, is that usually it'll give us a little more flexibility than just using the no-code solution. If you recall, when we were using a dropdown in the previous episode with no code, we could only set it so that the value of the selection from the dropdown is equal to what we want to filter by, okay, or not equal. But now, if that we're using no code, now that we're using code or low code, we essentially have the option to filter by all of these different things. So ends with, equals to, greater than, or has some, is empty, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so we have a lot of different options here that we can filter by. I'm not going to go into each and every one and what it means, but just be aware that if you're not achieving what you want with the no-code solution, then you can take the principles that I'm showing you here today and use them to create a custom filter using some code. So since we are still building a filter that will just show us the data that is equal to the selection from the dropdown. So for example, if I select BMW, it will show me all the BMWs. Then we are going to use this equals, this equal filter over here. So it's EQ. And if I go back over here to my code, over here for the filter, I can do dot EQ. And then I will want to add the field ID of the field that we're going to be filtering by. So to find the field ID, you can go over here into the code panel and go to databases and look for your collection over here in the list. So this is the cars collection. And you can see here that we have a list of all the fields and their unique IDs. You can even go ahead and copy the field ID just like that. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and paste it right over there. So equals make. And the make is essentially going to be the value of whatever we selected from the dropdown. So there's several ways that we can get the value of the dropdown. One thing that we can do is we can, for example, over here, say const make equals to, select the dropdown, and then tap into the value of the dropdown, and then put that make right over here. Just like that. Okay, that's one option. Another option is that when we are using an onChange, we also have access to something that's called the event. And since this is the onChange of our make filter dropdown, the make is also equal to event.target.value. So event is the event that happened, the change, the target of the event is the filter, is the dropdown, and the value is the value. So these two things, event.target.value and make filter dropdown.value, are essentially equivalent. Okay, these are two different ways that we can get the actual value of the dropdown after a change has been made. So this should be sufficient in order to allow us to filter by make. Okay, so essentially this, if this works, it'll take us back to our starting point, which is that we have a dropdown that will filter our repeater or data set. So let's go into preview mode and see if this works for us. So I'm going to go over here and select preview mode. And now that we're in preview mode, I'm going to select a make here from our dropdown. So let's select, let's say, Mercury. And you can see here that we're now filtering and we only see Mercury options here. Okay, so essentially we managed to take ourselves back to point A using some code. And this may seem a little redundant at this point, but in a moment you'll see why we essentially did this and what this will allow us to do with regard to the models. Now that we have successfully established the make dropdown as a filter for our cars dataset, what we can do is, in addition to filtering just our cars dataset, we can also filter our models list dataset. Okay, and that is the dataset which is connected to our models dropdown. So essentially here inside of our code, instead of just setting a filter for our cars dataset, we can also set a filter for our models dataset. So I'm going to go here and select our models dataset and do the same thing that we did before, which is set a filter. And we're going to do wixdata.setFilter, dot filter, and we're going to say dot equals make is make. Okay, so really one for one what we did over here with the cars dataset. So both the cars dataset and the models dataset will be filtered by the make that was selected from the make dropdown. This might be a little hard to grasp, but let's take a look at what this does practically, and maybe that will clarify a little bit. So let's go over here, and now we're in preview mode. And first of all, so you see here now we have all the models, right? And if I go ahead now and select a make, let's say Mercury, and open the models drop down again, you'll see here now that we only have a list of like 10 or so models. And these are the models that belong to Mercury. Okay, let me change this again. So let's say Mazda. And you can see here now that we only have models that are Mazda models. And same thing for Hummer. Okay, and if you know these cars and these models, then you can actually verify that this is correct. But this is essentially what we wanted to achieve. So now, when a user selects something from the make, they don't see every single model, which is irrelevant, but they only see the specific models that pertain to that specific make. The last piece of the puzzle here will be to allow this model dropdown to also filter our cars dataset. So let's hop in here to our IDE. And in order to do that, we're really going to have to do something very similar to what we did over here for the make filter dropdown. We're going to do for the model filter dropdown. For our model filter dropdown, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the code that we already wrote as a starting point for this filter and just make a few changes to make it fit our second dropdown. There are always mixed views about the value or / importance of not copying code, as it can sometimes introduce more bugs that you need to deal with versus just writing the code yourself. But I'm going to cross my fingers and hope that nothing too bad happens over here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just copy all of this here that we have inside of our onReady. And I'm going to paste it underneath. And let's go ahead and start making some changes to make this work for our model filter dropdown. So first of all, we're going to need to change this name over here to model filter dropdown. We're still going to be filtering the cars dataset, and we're still going to be getting the value of the dropdown. Just instead of calling it make over here, it'll make more sense to call it the model. This is no longer relevant, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. And here inside of our actual filters, instead of filtering the make field, we're going to be filtering the model field with the model value. Last but not least, we can go ahead and get rid of this filter because we don't need to filter the models dataset when we're picking an option from the models dropdown. If you have another link in the chain, if you're using 3 dropdowns, 4 dropdowns, etc., then you'll want to keep on filtering as you go. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. And that should be all that we need. So I'm going to go into preview mode. And here in preview mode, what I'm going to do is select, let's say, Mercury. So now we're seeing all the different Mercuries. And let me select a specific model, such as Cougar. And now you see that we're seeing only the Mercury Cougars. Okay, so that is an implementation of a double drop down that filters each other. So 2 filters that filter each other and a repeater. And the last thing that I'm going to show you is just one small UI improvement. And that is that we don't want to allow people to select, more of a UX improvement. We don't want people to select a model before they've selected a make, okay? Because essentially before they select a make, they'll have just all of the different models in the dropdown. So in order to prevent that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the model dropdown to be disabled by default. So I'm just going to select the element over here, and then here you'll see that it's checked that it's enabled by default, but I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to enable this dropdown. You can see it kind of turned a little kind of grayish over here. That's because it's disabled. And after we make a change to our make filter dropdown, I am going to enable the model filter dropdown. So I'm just going to do it right over here on the bottom. Let me make sure you can actually see what I'm writing. So I'm going to write here, I'm going to select the model filter dropdown, and I'm going to enable it, just like that. So let's see what that looks like over here. And I am going to go ahead and select, let's say, another one. So first of all, you can see here it's disabled. Okay, can't click on it. And it'll only be enabled once I select a make. Now I can select the different models. Okay, so that is, again, an example of a filter that filters a filter. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see the rest of the videos in this series / other videos related to Wix and customizing your Wix website, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. This tutorial may be over, but that doesn't mean that your journey has to end here. YouTube will have some recommendations up above in a moment for more videos, but don't get too distracted because my eyes are over here, and on the WixWiz website we have a lot more resources for you to continue learning or get support for your business or project. We've got a blog, beginner courses, and a community forum where you can vent about Velo or post some tough questions like, why does my header have a mind of its own? On the website, you can also find my personal calendar to schedule a one-on-one and details about getting ongoing assistance from our team of Wix experts. I'll catch you later, and don't forget that every big feature was once a small bug.